Welcome to another Georgia prison war story.
Stoneman Steve wasn't scared of evil folks. The dorm buzzed low with sound, voices faint in the distance. The ice clicked on concrete. Someone arguing over a honey bun. Just another Thursday night in G2 at Smith State Prison in Glenville, Georgia. A heavily tattooed, biker-looking white boy named Steve sat on his top bunk back against the cinder block wall, ledger on his lap, a thin piece of pencil rolled between his fingers. He was marking debts, red for late, black for squared up. His hustle was simple, running a inmate store, simple economics. Buy off the prison store and sell each item 2 for 1. He didn't need to sell cream or Al Green because running a store was good enough. He didn't lend to fools or people with shady reps. That Friday night, as he went over his inventory, a loud voice rang out in his cell. "Yo, Steve, shit might pop off downstairs," called out Doo-Wop, his bunkmate breezing through their cracked door. "Poker table is jumping. Evil folks done dropped 2 books already." Steve didn't respond, but he folded the ledger, slipped it under his mattress. The current poker game had started at 5:30 that morning and was still going strong at 5:30 that night. Low-key at first, cigarette buy-ins, couple ramen bets, but now it was heating up. Some nights in the Georgia chain gang were quiet like church. Others felt like somebody lit a fuse and walked off whistling. Steve walked down the tier, passing nods, skipping trouble. The crowd around the poker table was thick, a few bodies stacked by the wall watching, laughing low. No officer nearby. No need yet. At the table, 5 men sat in a half circle, some glistening with sweat, while others ate soups and burritos, smearing the grease on their hands or cards. Cigarette smoke floated up like prayers. Evil folks leaned back on the hard-ass metal stool with his shirt off, glaring at his competition with a creepy grin on his face. Arms veined, sweaty, twitchy, his eyes locked on the pile of commissary on the side of the table like it was stacks of real cash. "Raise $10, Evil folks said, tapping the table with 2 fingers. He grinned at Dizzle, a Dominican with slick back hair and a wide smile. "Call," Dizzle muttered, tossing in his own stack. "You bluffing?" said Evil folks, cracking his knuckles. "That last hand you ain't even breathe right." The third man folded. Everyone looked to Marcus, a lifer who wore silence like a second skin. He nodded and matched the raise. That pot had nearly $400 in it. The tension felt electric. Steve leaned on the top rail, arms crossed, bored. Evil folks looked up, spotted him. "What up, Stoneman?" he called. "Just watching." "I'm good for it if I need something to write," Evil folks added quickly, like the thought had been sitting on his tongue all day. Steve said nothing, just watched the cards flip. 3 hearts. King of Hearts, 8-5. The betting circled. Evil folks lost again. Another hand, another raise, another loss. Steve stepped back. He knew what was coming. This was his 11th week running a store in his dorm, and he had gotten used to the crediting habits of his fellow inmates. 10 minutes later, Evil folks was Steve's cell door, not even bothering to wait for permission to enter, which could get somebody hurt in a different situation. "Let me holler at you," he said low, grinning like he'd actually just won instead of losing all of his money a few minutes ago. Steve didn't move. "Shit, you already hollering." Evil folks glanced around, then leaned in. "Let me get $20 on credit till next week, Steve. I'm going to triple that next hand. I swear to God, been just missing my runs. I'm due." Steve raised an eyebrow. "You behind with 3 other dudes already, Evil." "Why would I give you 20? Evil folks grinned again, staring at the pile of commissary Steve kept in 4 net bags under the bottom bunk. "'Cause I asked nice," he said, "and 'cause I'll pay back tonight, soon as I drop these niggas on this poker table." Steve studied him. There was a time to say no, to close the book and walk off. But this was a moment of choice, one where saying yes wouldn't be about the $20, it'd be about life or death. Steve had heard and seen evil folks in action and knew a fight with him would have to go to length. He wasn't afraid, though. Just comfortable with his current position in life and not necessarily ready for it to be interrupted if it didn't have to be. Steve reached into one of the fat net bags and counted out 4 packets of tuna, 3 honey buns, 13 soups, and some summer sausages. $20, he said. "I need this back by store day." Evil folks snatched it quick like he just knew he was finna win the whole poker pot as soon as he could make it back downstairs. "I got you," he said, pounding his chest. "You gonna see magic next hand?" And Steve disappointedly watched him walk off, a feeling that something bad was about to happen. Magic didn't happen. 4 hands later, Evil folks was busted. Nothing in front of him but sweat, shame, and anger. "After the loss, I'ma run it back tomorrow." Evil folks barked to the group. "I got more coming. Y'all lucky tonight." No one answered. Dizzle just shook his head. Marcus lit a skeeter leg joint and leaned against the wall. Steve was laid back on his bunk, writing the entry in his ledger. Evil folks, $20, due Friday. T-Man leaned over. You gonna press him when he don't pay? Steve didn't look up. Who says he won't? T-Man laughed. You smarter than that, Steve. Steve closed the book. He wasn't worried. Not yet. But a debt in H1 was more than a number. It was a challenge. And Steve knew one thing for sure. You either collect or you die. A week later, 3 days had passed since store day. Evil folks hadn't paid a dime. At first, Steve gave him space. Maybe he forgot. Maybe something came up. But by day 6, when evil folks kept making pockets in the TV room and smoking Al Green right out in the open, Steve knew what it was. Disrespect. He approached him in the yard. Hey, evil, Steve said, calm but firm. It's been a week. I know you ain't forget. Evil folks didn't stop his slow stroll. He glanced at Steve, smirked, then kept walking. Man, I got you. Chill with that shit, he muttered, loud enough for others to hear. That was the first slick jab. By the next day, evil folks was in the yard posturing. He laughed louder than usual, threw Steve's name in random jokes, and brushed past him with shoulder checks. He was testing boundaries, daring Steve to act. Steve's rep was solid, but prison eyes never blinked. Word got back to the Ghostface gang, which Steve wasn't a part of, but held close ties to. Handle that, one of their shot callers told Steve in passing. This ain't the place for a store man with no hands. Even the Mexicans were watching. They whispered in corners, waiting to see if Steve would let it slide or hold court. That evening, Steve sent another message. His bus partner, who was in C dorm, old school, sharp and loyal dude who had been down 20-something years, slid up to evil folks at Chow. Steve said, he whispered, ain't no grace period. Evil folks clapped back in full view. Tell your homeboy he ain't gonna do nothing. Ain't nobody scared of no snack plug. That ripple of defiance ran through Evil's body. By sundown, tension wrapped the dorm like a cold fog. Everyone could feel it. Something was about to break.
Why you staring at my booty like that? Since you want to act all thirsty, you need to hit that like and subscribe button for this video. You keep staring at my booty and I'ma tell my man GK and he ain't gonna let you watch his stories no more.
The next morning, Steve made his move. He waited for evil folks to go to breakfast. After the officer stuck her ugly face through the door and said, stand by for chow. And Steve walked up to Evil as he sat on one of the steel stools bolted to the floor. Hey, Evil, I'm gonna need that money today. A few witnesses sat nearby pretending to read, but all ears were tuned in. Evil folks turned to Steve, laughing as one of his GD brothers was telling him about a play he was putting together. Steve stood calm as stone. You hear me? Evil folks puffed up, smirked. Yeah, I took that, Steve. Don't come at me about that no more. Steve closed the distance in 2 strides and pressed him to the table. Not wild, not loud, just enough pressure for evil folks to feel the difference. You owe me. Steve said low, I need that money, Evil. Evil folks froze. That wicked grin surfaced on his stolid face. The dorm went still. As Evil's GD bro got up to confront Steve, evil folks pushed him back and told Steve, I'll get that to you. Steve let him go. All right, I'll be waiting. By this time, almost everyone in the dorm was watching because Chow was finna be called. People couldn't believe what they were seeing and thought Evil was just messing around and was finna rip the white boy's face off, but he didn't. For the next dozen hours, Steve's heroics were all the dorm could talk about. The GDs questioned evil folks about his decision, and he suspiciously assured his brothers that everything was good. About 43 minutes before lockdown that night, Steve was prepared to carve evil folks up just like he did his ex-wife and her 4 kids after finding out she was cheating on him with his 73-year-old father. He slowly walked up to his cell, strapped with a 14-inch bone crusher that would do severe and fatal damage if it came into contact with any part of Evil's small body. Several inmates stared at Steve, smirking because they were hoping he was the person to finally take Evil out of the game. Most of them were victims of Evil's rap and were missing store goods and even several teeth due to the 5'7" menace. When Steve got to Evil's door, he noticed that the lights were out, meaning he could possibly be sleeping, which would make this hit hella easy, so he crept into the darkened room with his weapon out, ready to get his respect back. As Steve started slashing at what he thought was the piece of shit slender body under the itchy state blanket on the bottom bunk, he noticed that he was making contact with a bunch of sheets and a pillow propped up to look like a human body was asleep under the blanket. Before Steve could react, there was an instant sharp pain coming from his lower legs, which caused him to immediately drop to the cold floor in pain, his bone crusher snatched out of his hand by an unseen figure. When the cell light came on a second later, Steve looked in horror at the damage done to his legs. Evil Folks was hiding under the bed when he entered the room and sliced open the tendons in both ankles as Steve stood over the bottom bunk, rendering him paralyzed and bleeding profusely. Even though it was 20 minutes before lockdown, Evil closed his cell's door and turned to a weak Steve with that wicked grin on his face. As he began doing to him what he intended to do to him, which was carve chunks of flesh out of his body until his skeleton was exposed. When inmates in the dorm heard Steve's guttural screams followed by silence, they knew what was happening and quickly started hiding their contraband because they knew what was coming next. A major shakedown due to Evil's bullshit. Every time he gets into it with somebody, he can't simply fight them like a normal convict. He has to do some zombie horror movie-ish and chop off a body part or cut out an eyeball or something. Later that night, Steve was airlifted to the nearest trauma center, but he didn't make it. Evil Folks ended up with 21 months on the tier program, but only served 14 before he was transferred. For all of y'all little niggas out there that's on the path to the chain gang, I advise y'all to change your ways before you end up crossing paths with a guy like Evil Folks. If you ain't prepared to go all the way with a dude like that, you'll end up like Steve.